Welcome back, everybody. We're diving into a story today that's probably familiar to a lot of you. It's Jacob's return to his homeland, Genesis 32. But I think we're going to find some layers here that you might not have thought about before.
Yeah, it's a passage that really has a lot of depth, you know? Psychologically and spiritually, it touches on stuff that we all still deal with today, even though it's, thousands of years old?
Right. So the basic setup.
Yeah.
Jacob's heading back to Canaan after being gone for decades. But, I mean, it's not just a simple homecoming, is it?
Not exactly, no. He's got to face his brother, Esau, the one he cheated out of his birthright years ago. And let's just say those kinds of things, they don't always just fade away with time.
Yeah, that's like that feeling when you know you really messed up and now you have to, deal with the consequences.
Right, exactly. Except in Jacob's case, the consequences might be, a very angry brother with 400 men.
Oh, yeah. That adds a little extra pressure.
For sure. And the text actually says that Jacob was really afraid, super anxious. It even says he split up his camp, send his wives and kids, all his stuff, across the river Jabbok in separate groups.
So he's not taking any chances, trying to minimize the damage just in case, right?
Exactly. He's thinking, if Esau's going to attack, at least everyone won't be wiped out at once.
I mean, that's what I find so interesting. Here's a guy who's supposedly been blessed by God, right?
Yeah.
He's gotten these promises about an amazing future, and yet he's totally freaked out and trying to control everything.
Right. It makes you think, is he really trusting God? Or is he putting more faith in his own plans?
I mean, it seems like he's doing both, doesn't it?
Yeah, totally. He's hedging his bets, spiritual and practical, all at the same time. Which, isn't that something we can all relate to?
Absolutely. We pray, but we also make backup plans, just in case.
Totally. It's that human thing, We want to surrender to something bigger, but we also can't help trying to manage stuff on our own. But here's what's interesting. Even with all this planning, Jacob does something else. He turns inward. He prays to God.
Yeah. And it's not a prayer full of confidence, is it? It's raw.
Yeah.
Vulnerable, even kind of desperate, I think. He's like, God, I know I'm not worthy. I've made mistakes. And he's begging for protection for himself and his family.
Yeah, there's a real humility there. He's not coming to God because he thinks he deserves anything. He's coming from a place of need, and it's honest, He admits he's afraid. The text says, I'm afraid he'll come and attack me and the mothers with their children. So it's not just about Jacob. He's worried about everyone he loves.
And that leads us to, one of the most powerful and kind of mysterious scenes in the whole chapter, the wrestling match. So Jacob sends his family across the river. He's alone. And in the middle of the night, he's confronted by this man.
Yeah, and the text doesn't say exactly who this is, which is, I think, what makes it so interesting. Some people say it's an angel, others think it's like a divine being, and then there are those who say it represents Jacob's own inner struggle.
Whatever it is, it's definitely a fight. It says they wrestle all night. Neither one can win. Just imagine that, the strength it must have taken to keep going until the sun came up.
Right, and I think it goes way beyond a physical fight. It's more like a spiritual wrestling match, a struggle with the unknown, facing our deepest fears, all that stuff.
And in the middle of all this, something huge happens. The man touches Jacob's hip and it gets dislocated. So Jacob is hurt, but he doesn't give up. He even demands a blessing from whoever this is he's fighting.
Yeah, that's such a powerful image, right? It's like this paradox. Surrender and persistence, both at the same time. Jacob's injured. He's forced to see his limits, but he refuses to back down. He's holding on until he gets a blessing. It's like he's saying, look, I'm broken, but I'm not defeated. I'm going to keep fighting with my fears, with my past, until I find a way through.
And then it gets even more interesting.
Right, because the man asks him, what's your name? And when Jacob answers, he gets renamed. He's Israel now.
Which, that's not just a random name change, right? That's significant.
Oh, absolutely. The name Israel, it means a lot. People interpret it different ways, but one of the most common is he who struggles with God. And this new name, it doesn't erase Jacob's past. He still remembers the lies. He's still scared of his brother. He still carries the weight of what he did wrong. But it's a turning point. It's like a deeper connection with God. An acknowledgement that even in the struggle, there's blessing, there's change.
Yeah, it's like being told you've fought with your demons, with your past, even with God, and you've come out different.
Exactly. But starting this new chapter, it's not like everything is suddenly perfect.
Because he leaves with a limp, right? That entry stays with him.
Yeah. And that's important, I think. It's like even these powerful encounters, these moments of grace, they can change us permanently. They shape us physically and everything.
So Jacob's changed, but he's still marked by what he's been through. It's a really powerful image, I think. It makes you ask questions about faith, about how we change, and how we live with our past. Okay, so we left off with Jacob, or Israel now, I guess, walking away from that wrestling match. Limping, but with a new name and a blessing. And this is it, right? This is where he finally meets Esau, face to face.
Right, the moment of truth.
After all that planning and the whole wrestling with God thing, how does it actually go?
Well, it's kind of surprising, actually. Remember all those precautions Jacob took?
Yeah, dividing his camp, sending all those gifts ahead.
It almost seems unnecessary when you see what happens next.
You mean those 400 men weren't about to, unleash their fury? So what happens?
Esau sees Jacob, and instead of getting angry, he just, loses it emotionally. He runs up to him, hugs him, starts crying.
Whoa. Okay, that's definitely not what I was expecting. I mean, Esau has every right to be furious, right?
Oh, totally. But the story doesn't go the way you think it will. It's trying to show us something about forgiveness, how complicated relationships can be. Esau reminds us that people can surprise you with how much compassion they have, how much they can change.
Yeah, it's like, don't assume the worst, I guess. Give people a chance.
Exactly. And it shows that forgiveness, it doesn't always erase the past, but it can totally change the future.
So is everything perfect now? Are they like best buds again?
Not exactly. I mean, there's forgiveness, but the past is still there. Jacob keeps bowing down to Esau, calling himself a servant.
He's acknowledging what he did wrong, right?
Yeah. It's like he's saying, look, I know I messed up. It happened.
And it's interesting because even after this reunion, Esau doesn't want to travel with Jacob. He goes his own way, back to Seir.
Right, there's definitely something complicated going on there. It seems like they've forgiven each other, but maybe it's still a bit fragile,
It's like forgiveness is real, but it doesn't mean everything's suddenly fixed.
Yeah, the past is still there. And even when there's forgiveness, it takes time to, figure things out.
It's a pretty realistic way of showing how forgiveness works, I think.
Yeah.
It's not always this magical thing where everyone's instantly happy.
Right, it takes work, patience. And you have to figure out how to move forward together.
And that's something we could all probably relate to, right?
Oh, absolutely. Think about times when you've had to forgive someone or be forgiven. It's not easy. There's hurt and grace, and you got to figure out a new way to be with each other.
So what about Jacob? What happens to him? Does he finally get to settle down and live a peaceful life?
Well, yeah, he does eventually move on and settle in Canaan. But things are rarely simple in Genesis, are they?
I have a feeling there are more challenges ahead for him.
You're right about that. He's going to face new conflicts, especially within his family. Things that'll really test his faith.
So he faced his past, made things right with his brother, and he even got a new name, a new identity. But his journey isn't over.
And that's what makes this story so interesting, I think. Life's a journey, not a destination. Even after big changes, there are always new challenges. We have to keep growing, keep learning.
So we're back. And still exploring Jacob's journey in Genesis 32. We've seen him work through his fears, make things right with Esau, even wrestle with, well, God, I guess you could say. But like I was saying, it doesn't exactly end with a happily ever after.
Right, it's kind of a new beginning for him, He's Israel now, but it's not all smooth sailing from here. Life throws him a curveball, I guess you could say, and it hits his family pretty hard.
Yeah, this is where we get to the story of Dinah, Jacob's daughter, and this guy, Shechem, the Canaanite prince. It's a tough story. There's violence and a lot of really complicated emotions.
It definitely reminds us that even when you've, met with God and received blessings, you're still living in a world that's, broken, full of sin.
Yeah, and the text doesn't try to hide how brutal it is. Shechem, he violates Dinah, and that sets off this whole chain of events. Deceit, revenge, and just a lot of bloodshed.
Yeah, it's a hard passage to read, and it brings up a lot of questions about justice, mercy, how to deal with trauma, all of that.
One thing I find interesting is, how Jacob, Israel now, how he reacts to this whole thing. He seems kind of hesitant at first, almost passive. It's his sons, Simeon and Levi, who really take charge. They're the ones who want revenge.
Yeah. Some people think that Jacob's reaction is actually a sign of growth. He used to be really impulsive, but maybe that wrestling match changed him. Maybe it made him more cautious. Or maybe being a leader now, having to protect everyone, has made him think more carefully before he acts.
But his sons, they're driven by anger. They feel like their honor has been attacked, so they take action. And they're ruthless.
Yeah.
They trick the men of Shechem City, and then, they kill them all. And later, Jacob condemns what they did.
Yeah. This whole episode, it shows us how easy it is for violence to erupt, even within a family, even within a group of people who share the same faith.
And it makes you wonder, what about Dinah? I mean, we don't really hear her side of the story, but you can imagine what she must be going through, the trauma, the pain.
Right. It's a reminder that even in these stories, there are things that aren't said, consequences that we don't always see.
In the end, Jacob takes his family and moves away from Shechem. He knows it's not safe there anymore.
Yeah.
And I think he's also dealing with the weight of what his sons did in his name.
Yeah, it's a really complicated situation. There are no easy answers. It forces us to confront the darker side of human nature, I guess you could say, and how destructive sin can be.
So this is the end of our deep dive into Genesis 32. And I think it's a good time to ask, what can we take away from all this? What does Jacob's story, even with all the messiness, what does it offer us today?
Well, for me, one of the big takeaways is that change, real transformation, it takes time. It's a process. Even after meeting with God, Jacob still faces difficulties. He makes mistakes. He has to deal with really tough situations.
It's like his new name, Israel. It's not like he's reached the finish line. It's more like he's been pointed in the right direction. He's on a path now.
Exactly. And our own faith journeys, they're like that too, right? We have moments where we grow, where things become clear. But we also mess up, we fall short. And we end up in situations that really test us.
And that's okay. It's not about being perfect. It's about staying on the path, even when it's hard, even when we're not sure what's ahead.
Yeah. Jacob's story shows us that having faith doesn't mean life will be easy. It means we have a chance to grow, to get closer to God. And it's a promise that even when things are broken, there's always a possibility of healing, of forgiveness, and ultimately of blessing.
That's a great place to end, I think.
Yeah.
So, as you think about Jacob and his journey, think about your own. What are you struggling with? What challenges are shaping you?